Hello Horus Heresy fans, welcome to Heresy, the Horus Heresy talk show. In this video, I'm going to be telling you all about the different ways in which you can equip your Legion heavy support squads. I'm going to talk about the weapons as well, so if you're interested in, the different heavy weapons and how they perform, this is also a good episode to listen to. So one of the things I like doing is paying attention to Facebook and Reddit and other sources and seeing what kind of stuff people are discussing. And one of the things I see come up quite a lot is how to equip heavy support squads, which is the best gun, how many people you want to have in the unit and that kind of stuff. So I thought I'd do an episode on that and just talk all about the different advantages and disadvantages of the different ways in which you can do this. So firstly, let's talk about squad size. So this seems to be one of the things that people are quite confused about what the best thing is to do in this situation. So big squads basically give you the best bang for your buck is the answer. So the first 5 models in a heavy support squad cost 20 points each. It's a 100-point unit. But the extra models only cost 15 points each. So when you make that squad bigger, instead of having 2 different squads, it costs you less points. Also, augury scanners are very good. And if you buy one of them for a 10-man unit, you're basically paying 1 point per model. And if you buy it for a 5-man unit, you're paying 2 points per model. So you get your augury scanner cheaper. You also benefit more from reactions with a big squad. So if you shoot me and I've got a squad of 10 Lascannons, my reaction is going to give me 10 Lascannon shots. If I've got smaller squads of 5 or 6 Lascannons, I'm going to get less benefit from my reaction. So that's the advantages to having a big squad. But there are downsides too. So it's a lot more points in one unit if someone's going to pin you. So if your unit gets shot and gets pinned, you've basically doubled almost the efficiency of the other person pinning you. So it's a lot more eggs in one basket. You've only got one reaction as well. So although you may only have one shooting reaction in a turn, depending on what army you're playing, if all your stuff is in one unit, it means that it's easier to bait that reaction as well. Whereas if you've got multiple units, you've got multiple sources of reaction. It isn't really a big deal because the reaction gets so much more effective, but it is a slight downside. It's easier to focus a big squad as well. So if your enemy's got a big shooting unit and they shoot at a unit of 5 guys, they might waste a bunch of shots if they overkill them. Whereas a unit of 10 is definitely going to be worth them putting lots of firepower into. And it's also in some situations, especially with Marines being on quite reasonably sized bases, harder to get your cover bonuses sometimes with bigger units as well. And they really do love their cover saves in these Space Marine units to keep them alive for longer and the potential to get shrouded from a reaction as well. So that's a minor one, but it is a relevant one. Let's talk about their equipment. So you basically always take the augury scanner. It's just so good. It just does so much stuff for 10 points. It means you can ignore the night fight and range limitation. It gives you free interceptor reactions. It's just really good things. You pretty much always take the augury scanner, or at least make sure you've got one in the unit from another source. Artificer armor is also great, but it's got some downsides. So firstly, if your sergeant is taking the hits, when he dies, it means you're going to lose a leadership as well as a sergeant as well, which is a bad thing. And also as well, in a smaller squad, it's not necessarily that great for the points, for 10 points. For the same reason, the augury scanner on a smaller squad is less efficient. So I would definitely always take the artificer armor on your bigger squads. But on the smaller squads, you may not just want to spend the points, because it's only 10 points, but they do add up across an army when you buy lots of artificer armors and stuff. If you've got plasma in the army as well, Nuncio Vox is really good. So that's really the only time it's good, but plasma really benefits from those rerolls on blasts. But you can also have a Nuncio Vox in your army somewhere else as well. A unit of tactical Marines could carry a Nuncio Vox for you, especially if you've got lots of blast weapons in the army. It doesn't necessarily have to go on the heavy support squad. Let's talk a little bit about things you can buy to join your squad as well. So the big one is the Armistos. So he's only 75 points, the Armistos consul. He's pretty cool. He comes with a Cognus Signum, and he also comes with that augury scanner as well. So he's effectively 65 points to my mind, because you're always going to buy the augury scanner anyway, which is pretty cheap. It increases the amount of hits you're going to get with his Cognus Signum. So generally, I wouldn't put a heavy weapon on your Armistos if you're trying to be efficient. Like, I want to model my Armistos doing some kind of direction, like pointing at the enemy, or maybe, you know, pointing at some kind of scope at the enemy or something like that. But if you want to take one with the heavy weapon for coolness factor, that's also completely fine as well, of course. He basically increases the amount of hits you get by 25%. So when, you know, you're trying to figure out, is the Armistos worthwhile, that's what he does. So if he's in a 10-man squad, it's like having another 2.5 Marines. If he's in a 5-man squad, it's like having another 1.25 Marines. So really, he rarely gets his benefit from his Cognus Signum when your units are bigger. So I would probably only use him on units that are about 8 or bigger, because then he's the equivalent of 2 men, and he's also bringing you those extra wounds to the unit, 9 leadership, and he's also bringing you another Artificer armor save. So, you know, at some point you'll just let the Armistice die so all your heavy weapons can stick around, and he does give you a couple of extra wounds to do that. Importantly as well, if you've got an Artificer armor sergeant in the unit, if he takes some hits, you've still got the 9 leadership Armistos in the unit as well. So the Armistos is a really good addition to big units if you've got a HQ slot spare, and if you know, want to model a model. I think they're great conversion opportunity on Armistos models. The Apothecary is another obvious one. It's quite expensive, so he's only really worth it on unit to 10. On a unit of 5, he's probably a little bit too expensive to bother with, because you just don't really get the return. And a lot of the time as well, people, because of the range of a lot of the weapons people might be shooting your heavy support squads with, if they're, you know, ones that hang around at the back of the battlefield, you might find they get shot with missile launchers and stuff a lot as well, which means that the Apothecaries feel no pain won't actually help. So maybe on unit of 10 I would consider the Apothecary, but by no means he's as good as he is with things like Tactical Marines. A Techmarine's the last one, so he's 70 points if you give him a Cognus Signum as well. So really, he's more expensive than an Armistos. If you give him the Augury Scanner as well, he's 75 points, which is kind of 65 if you ignore that cost, because you were going to buy it anyway. So he's the same actual points value as the Armistos, but he just does less. You know, he doesn't give you the same amount of wounds. He's only leadership 8, not leadership 9. You do get a bit more value out of him if your Devastator squad is gonna if your heavy support squad is gonna hang around with a dreadnought or a vehicle, and they can like get into base-to-base contact with them, so the Techmarine can repair it. And he does bring a little bit of melee power, which on occasion might be nice to hit someone with a power axe if they charge you in melee. But realistically, he's a little bit expensive, the Techmarine. I'm not quite sure why he's so many points when the Apothecary is cheaper. But not an amazing option overall, but not a bad one either. And if you want to put some Techmarines in your army, if you want some variety and some, you know, a way to use those cool models, they're certainly worth including. And again, you can't always get the Armistos in a HQ slot. If you really love consoles like I do, they might be filled with other stuff. So the Techmarine's worth your consideration. Now on to the exciting part, the weapons. This is the bit we like to talk about when we're talking about heavy support squads, is the guns themselves. What do they do? And again, this is also applicable to these heavy weapons in general and lots of other units. Now, bear in mind, the points will change on other units, which does affect, you know, how good sort of the weapon is. But, you know, this is all mostly relevant in what they do for units that aren't heavy support squads as well. So first of all, we got the heavy bolter, the cheap option. It's built in. You don't pay any points for it. Heavy bolter is largely overshadowed by all of the other options at the moment. There's not really a good reason beyond like aesthetics, or, you know, if you're a really dedicated Imperial Fist player, to bring these weapons at the minute. Until there's things in the game that have got a 4+ save that they can penetrate, they're kind of just worse than the other weapons at pretty much everything right now. And that does mean even if you're an Imperial Fist player as well. So even with +1 ballistic skill, the other weapons that want to, you know, shoot at troops like Heavy Bolter does are still better, even if you're an Imperial Fist player. So Heavy Bolter, quite the weak option. Heavy Flamer is the next one. Now, I think Heavy Flamers are actually quite an overlooked option. Now, I don't know what they did last edition, but certainly in this edition, Heavy Flamers are really, really interesting. So the first thing is that they're assault weapons, right? So they're not heavy weapons, so really it completely changes the way that the squad works. They're very good versus big squads. So versus unit to 10, if you can get a decent flamer template down, you're getting a really good number of auto hits, which makes it better than any of the other weapons we're going to talk about at killing troops. And if you're playing against people bringing squads of 20, like tactical marines or assault marines or whatever, they're even better. They're also cheap. They're only 5 points, but remember, you're probably going to be bringing a Rhino or something to make these actually worthwhile. So, that adds to the overall cost. But you do get a Rhino as well, which is, not just for transport and marines. It's also good at other bits. You can bring a searchlight on it and that kind of stuff. And so, the summary of these is if you do expect big blobs of enemy troops or you play against that a lot, this is actually a really good option. It's not the long-ranged option like most of these things are, but it's a really, really good option. And if you play Salamanders, where they get those Dragon's Breath Heavy Flamers as a free upgrade, these are even better. So, you should definitely look at Heavy Flamers because I think they're, quite overlooked as to how good they are right now. Autocannons. I really love the autocannon rules in this edition because I'm very, maths savvy, right? And I think about maths quite a lot. The maths on autocannons are really, really difficult to sort of visualize and see how good they are, and that's what makes this weapon so interesting. So they haven't got a truly great target at the moment because, much like heavy bolters, AP4 doesn't really penetrate anything right now, and automata might be a good thing for these to shoot at in the future. They're like toughness 5 or 6, so autocannons wound them well, and they've got AP armor 4, and autocannons have got 2 shots, so they might be quite good at shooting that, for example. Now, autocannons have got very weird maths due to having rend on a 6+ and strength 7. They're actually not bad versus AV14, weirdly. So, like a Lascannon as an example, the primo anti-vehicle weapon has got about a 55% chance to glance or better an armor 14 vehicle once it's hit. Whereas an autocannon's got a 30% chance to glance, which is still pretty high, given it's only strength 7. So pretty much a 1 to 5 is going to do nothing, but a 6 is going to pen a third of the time and glance a third of the time. So that's actually quite cool. But what's really interesting is that autocannons are arguably better against armor value 15 than Lascannons are, because a Lascannon's got, with its reroll from Sunder, a 30% chance to glance an armor value 15 vehicle, but an autocannon has got a 10% chance to glance, but a 10% chance to pen, which is way better. So, arguably, autocannon's actually better at it, and as well, part of that percentage is because the autocannon's got 2 shots, so the autocannon's got a small chance of actually doing double something, whereas a Lascannon can only ever do 1. So, quite funnily, autocannons are actually a pretty good option if you want to shoot at things like Land Raiders and Spartans. If you're Iron Warriors or Imperial Fists as well, autocannons are just better a lot of the time, particularly Iron Warriors, shooting at vehicles with them obviously is a big deal, and Imperial Fists, they're just good against everything. So you should definitely consider autocannons if the thing you want your unit to shoot at is very big, or if you're one of those 2 legions as well. Missile launchers next. So missile launchers, as they always have been, are the flexibility option. So generally you're going to be firing crack missiles, which is good for killing marines without invulnerable saves, because it gets around feel no pain from things like apothecaries. That's one way of using them. They're obviously also decent at killing vehicles, although if you're going to be doing that a lot, Lascannons are a lot better. And flak is the other thing you'll be firing with them if you're not firing crack, because it gives you that AA option, anti-air option, in your army. Now, it's not that you need anti-air in your army, but it's a nice thing to have access to if your opponent does bring some flyers. So again, flexibility. Frag is not something you're going to use very much because it's just not really very good unless you're desperate to just try to pin something and fire some frag missiles on the off chance. It's not that great, but when squishier targets appear in the future, there are maybe some solar auxilia or something like that to shoot at. Obviously, that will get a lot better. So missile launchers do give you flexible option. Multi-Meltas now, they're twin-linked, which makes them very accurate, which is such a great rule. And they are obviously very strong because they're strength 8 and AP 1, which is great. The downside to using Multi-Meltas is that they're short range, obviously, and their armor bane range is even shorter. So it's really hard to use these in a heavy support unit against vehicles in a way which is going to be optimal. And obviously they're heavy as well, so moving there is harder. But if you are Death Guard, that gets a bit easier. They're quite good for shooting elite infantry because they instant death them because they're strength 8, and they go through all of the armor 2+ saves that elite infantry have as well. So they're very accurate. They go through stuff and they instant death on it too. So that's one thing these are actually good at. And if you're using them defensively when them elite infantry are coming to you, you know, for example, Terminators and that kind of stuff, it's actually not a bad weapon. If you're Death Guard as well, you can put these in a Rhino and just drive them forward, jump them out, and then shoot something, which is quite a cool thing as well. So not that easy to use multi-melters, but they are a great option for certain things. Plasma cannons are the next one, so I won't bore you, again, the maths, but a plasma cannon with its scatter is actually more accurate than a ballistic skill 3+ weapon at like actually scoring a hit. Obviously, only by a tiny bit though. Obviously, they get much better when you're firing against big units of troops. And again, much like the heavy flamer, if you're firing these at units of 20 tacticals and stuff, they're very good. You know, it's very hard. It's very hard, or at least harder, for them to miss. If you get lucky with them, you can get multiple hits per blast marker as well. So that's a thing. There is a lot of rolling though. One of the things that's a problem with plasma weapons is you sort of have to roll the individual models to see if they get hot, which is like the way the rules work, which is kind of annoying. And that would put me off, certainly in a fun game like Heresy. It would put me off actually taking these, just the hassle of making those rolls. But plasma cannons are a really good option, particularly if you want to kill troops, and especially if they're in bigger units. Volkite Culverins, now these are one of the primo heavy weapons, so really big range, 45 inches, cheap at only 5 points each as well. Amazing at killing Space Marines, so they get so many shots, 5 shots each is just huge, and they wound on a 2 because of their strength 6, and then they've got Deflagrate as well. Deflagrate's not a very good rule, but it does add an extra few hits. Very, very good at killing Marines, the best weapon at doing it. Also very good at killing things with good invulnerable saves, so things like Phalanx Wardens and Storm Shield Terminators, Fire Drakes, that kind of stuff, where if you did shoot them with a Lascannon or something like that, they'd just get an invulnerable save anyway. You're actually better putting a high number of shots into them to try to kill them. The same goes for shooting at things with 2+ saves as well, although often 2+ saves and high invuns go hand in hand. But long story short, Volkite Culverins are basically great at killing everything, and also light vehicles as well, because of the sheer amount of strength 6 shots that they put out. So these are one of the best, or maybe the best option on these heavy support squads. The other best option on heavy support squads is the Lascannon. Now, Lascannons have been around forever, and if you're a long time Warhammer player, you will probably feel like I do, that Lascannons have never actually been any good at the thing that they're supposed to do in the narrative, which is kill vehicles, but now they are. They're really good now. They got Sunder, they get to reroll their armor pen. They're also not so expensive that they're just, you know, you can't afford to take them either, which they've always been as well. So they're just good at killing big things. They're a cheap way to get lots of anti-armor into your list, and because they are reasonably priced at 10 points in a heavy support squad, they're also pretty good at like sniping 2+ save things as well. So again, whereas shooting Cataphracti might not be ideal because they got a 4+ invulnerable, shooting things in Artificer armor, like some of the more veteran units, is actually a pretty good use of Lascannons as well. All round, one of the greatest choices in this unit. So in summary, the best general anti-vehicle weapon you can take is the Lascannon. No doubt about it. Huge range, really reliable, good at killing big things. The best anti-elite weapon you can take is also either a Lascannon or Volkite Culverins is also another good anti-elite choice, so both of those can be repurposed either way. And the best general anti-infantry is the Volkite Culverin. So you can see both of those weapons have their own category, plus they're good at killing elites as well compared to the other weapons. So they are really good options for your heavy support squads. But also as well, all these other weapons are also good. So autocannons, situationally good against that very high armor stuff. Heavy flamers, as we discussed as well. Multi-Meltas if you can use them. Missile launchers give you that flexibility, and plasma cannons can be even better than Volkite Culverins, but mostly only when you're shooting at units of 20, and if you're willing to take that get hot pain. The only weapon on these squads that's not really very good is the heavy bolter, and that may change in the future as well. So ultimately, you know, all of these weapons are viable pretty much and none of them bar the heavy bolter is really poor, which is great. It means there's lots of opportunities for variety in the force. Even though Lascannons and Volkites might be the best weapons, all the other weapons are very good as well. So if you've got lots of heavy weapons in your army, you've got the chance to vary them up. You're not spamming one type to make sure you've got a good one. They've all got their own slightly different roles, which is really cool. So I hope that information helps you. That's the end of this episode. Really, really interesting heavy support squads. I really like what they've done with them in this edition. I like that it's the first time that Devastator style units that I can remember have ever been so interesting and varied and good. If you've enjoyed the episode, please do like and subscribe, and also please do give me your feedback in the comments, whether it's just to say you enjoyed the video or to discuss anything that I've talked about, and I will speak to you very soon. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.